A metal drawer snapped
Stop!
open and Milo,
I
"These
have to,
pages
it's
are
the only
dated
way."
after
Milo,
closure."
Rowan,
The line
please,
landed
too
in the
late.
corridor like a warning. Suspicion tightened Alina's hands around the lamp as she stepped close. She smelled toner and cold brass and saw the official closure stamp still on the folder, clean and final. But the top sheet bore a timestamp from 3 days after the recorded end. That is the problem. A file that should not exist
The
kept
echo will be
writing itself.
activated.
Elena moved in on
August
habit.
14th, 2035.
She lifted the folder carefully with 2 fingers, thumb on the edge where the seal had been placed earlier that month. Her index finger found the archival stamp on its chain and she tapped it once, twice, as if sound might verify authenticity. Milo backed away and held up a flashlight. "Elena, look at the redactions," he said. "They re-wet." He pushed the beam over the page. Black bars shimmered at their edges with a sheen like fresh lacquer. Elena is 47, slender, chin-length steel, grey hair tucked behind her ears, and she keeps a pocket watch tied to a keyring. She has worked nights cataloging closed contingencies for nearly 20 years and knows the difference between a stray memo and a system breach. Suspicion is not an idea for her, it is a command. She read the lines aloud under her breath, and the words shifted with each slow syllable. Date says the 3rd at 0400, Milo. He flipped the page with quick fingers. "This wasn't here when we locked at midnight." His voice tightened. "Who filed this?" Elena did not answer with theory. She found the internal tag, the file header, and compared the typeface to the originals on the desk. The characters matched the Containment office's mainframe font, but the margin notes used a shorthand she had taught an assistant years ago. She touched the note and a faint impression was left on her fingertip. Containment Officer Rise was on call for the night sweep. Elena keyed the comm and kept the file on the desk between them. "Rise, we have a breach in 307 sealed folder." She paused to sort her words. "Fresh pages appended after closure. Request procedural containment." Her voice was low, controlled, the recorder tone she uses when listing irregularities. Rise answered with protocol, "Seal it." "Lock the corridor, tag for sweep." "Do you have personnel on site?" The council line cut in with Representative Lang's voice, distant and formal. "Elena, if you have an open file that appears to be active, close and seal immediately." "File discontinuation protocol applies." Elena noted the command and felt a reluctance grow in her throat. The reluctance hardened into a decision because the new sheets named names. The 4th page described an event that would take place in the reading room, at this table, and it listed Milo as a participant. Milo's face changed. He pushed the chair back and stood up so fast the desk lamp rocked. "I am leaving, Milo," and he moved toward the stairwell. The door to the stairwell did not open. He tested the handle. "It's locked." He called, "Elena, I can't get it." His voice became an urgent rhythm of steps. Elena rose but did not move to the door. She set the sealed folder on the lamp's circle of light and read the next line out loud, "Dispose of subject." "Milo Reyes." The sentence settled between them like an instruction from a machine. Reyes, who had arrived within minutes, saw the page and his eyes lagged to the margin note. He barked an order to retreat and hands moved to secure the room. Elena reached for the chain with the archival stamp and folded her fingers around it, refusing to let anyone shred evidence before documentation. Language in the new pages matched her own marginal shorthand in places she thought she had hidden from everyone. Milo peered at a looping mark and said, "That looks like your notation, Elena." He did not frame it as accusation. He offered it as a discovery. The word that came to the surface was doubt. Doubt flicked across the faces of Reyes and Lang when Elena admitted she recognized the handwriting. Elena's first emotional shift was immediate, suspicion to defensive explanation. She set the stamp on the desk and said, "I used that shorthand for classification years ago. That does not mean I added these pages." Her tone was small and precise. She leaned forward and tapped the typewritten line where a new sentence slid into the margin as they watched. The spaces between letters filled like someone typing on another keyboard in the room. Ray stepped in, hands flat on the desk. "Stop." Everyone stopped touching the file. He said, "Elena, you catalog these. Tell me what you saw before the closure." His voice carried the room's authority. Elena recited the logs. She himmed the seal was intact. The last entry was 2 months prior. The system showed no authorized edit. She named the time they had locked the cabinets and the keys stored in her satchel. She read the official closure stamp aloud as if memory could authenticate paper. Lang's voice came through the secure line and said, "Seal the file and submit a closure report. We cannot maintain an active anomaly in a sealed list. Discontinue it officially and remove all personnel." Lang spoke with an institutional flatness that expected compliance. Elena hesitated. Her second emotional shift moved her from defense into mistrust and stubborn observation. She felt compelled to watch the object that refused to obey closure. If we seal it without documenting these new pages, they will disappear and the event will continue elsewhere. Procedure requires retention of all appended materials. Her words tried to anchor policy to reality. Reyes replied with a 3-line argument. Lang ordered closure. "Follow orders, seal now." Elena returned one short line. "I cannot sign a discontinuation that ignores newly appended evidence." The exchange was tight and fast. There were 3 back and forth lines in which Reyes urged closure and Elena refused. Security placed a perimeter as the corridor cameras recorded every angle. The night team arrived and moved with brisk motions, collecting the shelves. At the inspection table, the new pages continued to generate content. A blank margin filled with typed text while officers watched, and the typed text read, "Order. Dispose of designated subject now." The words hardened like instruction. Reyes lunged for the paper and tried to crumple it in his fist. Milo shoved Reyes' arm away. "Don't, Milo, we need evidence." The room broke into a rapid exchange. "Milo, step back." "Elena, give it to me." "No procedural retention." Their lines overlapped. There were quick, clipped sentences and names used repeatedly. Elena grabbed the paper and held it flat. "Reyes, do not destroy this," she said. She put her palm over the new line and watched the ink thicken. Her voice was a thin instrument. The underlying pressure in it made her tremble. "I will record. We document before disposal. That is the rule," the team argued. Representative Lang's voice echoed from the secure feed. "Close it." Now the line went dead in the room when a moderator ended the connection. The pages supplied a directive with a name and an address that had not existed 6 hours earlier. The entry included a marginal note in a script Elena recognized as her own shorthand. That recognition forced the next shift, from mistrust to bewildered guilt. She felt the contour of responsibility tighten. She considered whether her handwriting had been copied, whether she had been used, or whether she had authored these lines without knowing. She opened her mouth to explain and found the explanation thin. An interrogation room held a different light and a single chair. They put Elena there at dawn after the initial sweep. Reyes stood opposite with a file folder. "Elena, did you draft these pages?" he asked plainly. His voice was blunt. Elena swallowed. She answered with concrete facts about locks, stamps, times, and the satchel on her shoulder. "I sealed the file myself at midnight. I logged the closure. I did not type in the system. I did not append any pages." Her sentences were short and factual. Lang insisted they confiscate most documents. "We cannot allow active content to remain public." "Destroy non-essential copies." Elena argued in 3 short lines that destroying originals violated containment documentation protocols. Her argument drew a curt reply. "You are being insubordinate." The word hung there. Elena's hands tightened. She tapped the file edge with 2 fingers and counted off reasons. "If we destroy originals, we erase evidence of the operation. We remove the trail." Her voice cracked on the last word. Security returned the reading room to empty silence and removed officers. They left Elena one envelope on her desk. She opened it slowly and found a single council directive stamped with a date 6 months from now. The directive commanded final closure of the same folder on that future date and contained no signature, only a red circular stamp and the phrase, "File discontinued." The paper felt like a threat wrapped in bureaucracy. Elena walked back to the cabinet at dawn. She placed the sealed folder in its drawer, aligned the label, and slid the drawer shut. The act was routine. She paused, then wrote a single line on an index card and slipped it inside the folder where the fresh pages were. The note read, "Do not trust closure without review." E.K. She did not sign more than her initials. She resealed the drawer and swallowed the urge to call the council again. Her choice was concrete. Follow Lang and seal the file, or refuse and risk being accused of insubordination. She chose to reseal, but she left a trace that preserved the warning inside. That choice resolved the immediate mini-conflict in this chapter, a containment decision, a moral refusal to erase evidence, and a movement to keep watch. Still, the problem did not close. In her satchel she found, folded and tucked as if placed after she left the inspection room, a second envelope with a stamped date 6 months hence. She slid it into her pocket. The mid-chapter cliffhanger occurred when the inspection lamp flickered, and a new line appeared on the page at the exact moment the power cycled. The line read, "Recommend surveillance of archivist Alina K." The room went silent. Milo looked at Alina and said, "They named you." Alina's stomach tightened, and she had to steady her breath. She nothing for a long count, then finally put the file back in the drawer. The decision to watch rather than act hardened her next steps. Later that morning, representatives took sworn statements. Reyes insisted on a formal separation of duties. He read aloud his report in short lines. "We secured the wing, we removed copies, we initiated sweep." Lang's office demanded a full discontinuation report. Elena answered in 2-line replies and recorded her own log entry in the official ledger. She repeated the facts. Time logged, seal location, witnesses present, and the envelope found in her satchel. Her writing was precise and minimal. She used no metaphor. She wrote what she saw. A twist emerged when Milo, whose instinct was to flee, volunteered for continued observation. "I won't sign the closure if you won't, Elena." His voice was blunt and loyal. "Reyes, Milo, are you sure?" Milo's answer was 3 short sentences.
"Yes."
"I saw the pages. I was named. I will stand. We document this." That decision by Milo changed the dynamics. It forced Lang and Reyes to move from a single-channel directive to a negotiation. They could not simply eliminate the people involved without creating more documentation. Lang authorized a temporary retention with strict measures. Security installed a 2-person watch rotation and kept the file within locked evidence. Alina was assigned a surveillance schedule and ordered not to leave the building without authorization. Elena's emotions shifted again. The push and pull made her move from guilt into a cold resolve. She accepted the watch because she believed a sealed lie would be worse than an open threat. "I will catalog every insertion. I will sign for each page we find." Her hands steadied when she spoke. She set up a recorder and left it running on the desk. The device was an old model with a small red light. It recorded continuous audio, scrape of paper against desk, and any distant footsteps. At noon, security reported a structural sweep found no physical tampering on the cabinet. The 6AV timestamp showed no authorized access between midnight and 3 a.m. That left 3 options. Someone had remote access to the system, someone had physically added paper without triggering sensors, or the file content was producing itself. Elena's mouth went dry when she tested the latter hypothesis by watching a blank margin in the light and seeing letters emerge. She raised to hold his wrist in front of a light, and he did, showing the banded scars from field work. He watched her work with a mix of suspicion and concern. If the file writes itself, we have to treat this as an active anomaly rather than an administrative error. His words forced the team to confront a category the council did not publicly recognize. Elena agreed in 2 clipped sentences and then added, "We record everything as if it were evidence in court." She lined up the recorder, camera, and a witness in the room. Night returned. Alina sat at the lamp and kept watch. Milo took the first watch with her, and Reyes took the second. They spoke in short exchanges to stay awake. "Alina, do you think you might have written those notes in a sleep state?" "Milo," Alina answered, "No. I would remember filing them. I keep logs." She paused, then said, "But handwriting can be copied." "So can shortened," Milo replied. "Then we find who copied you." They kept the conversation tight and practical. The climax unfolded as the file produced its instruction to dispose and Reyes moved to carry out the order. The paper wrote a name and specified a disposal method. Reyes reacted on instinct and moved with his training, but Alina reached out and prevented him. They argued aloud in quick bursts. "Reyes, stop, it says dispose now. We photograph first. You redefine a clear order. Documentation overrides impulsive destruction." There were 5 rapid lines exchanged before Reyes lunged to tear the pages. In the scuffle, pages scattered across the table and a lamp tipped. Milo reached for a falling sheet and the ink left his palm. Officers moved in. Alina clutched the recorder and slid it into her cardigan. She kept repeating the procedural lines she had learned: call witnesses, tag artifacts, preserve chain of custody. Her voice held the institutional rhythm that steadied the commotion. After the scuffle, supervisors separated them and conducted a formal sweep. They removed most documents, leaving Alina with only what she had been allowed to log. Representative Lang ordered that the file be sealed and moved to a restricted vault. Lang's instruction was clear. Alina wrote the final remark in the ledger. Retention note filed in internal drawer. Watch assigned. Envelope with future directive found in satchel. She closed the entry and signed with her initials. At dawn, when the corridor emptied, Alina found the small sealed envelope slipped into her satchel. She had been searched and the satchel had been cleared during interrogation. How this envelope arrived, there was a new problem. She kept it folded in her palm while she replaced the drawer label. The envelope bore identical red ink to the closure directive and a stamped date 6 months away. Inside was a single line: file uninterrupted until closure date. No external review, there was no signature. She chose to reseal the drawer but not to surrender her warning. She opened the folder quietly, placed the index card she had written back among the fresh pages, and slid the envelope on top. She resealed the folder with the institutional tape, stamped her chain stamp once to validate the action, and returned the drawer to its slot. She locked the cabinet and walked out with her hands steady. The chapter ends with a concrete beat. As Alina shut the heavy door to the archive corridor, she felt the metal bump of the cabinet against her elbow. She turned, pressed her palm flat to the drawer, and whispered the single sentence into the recorder before she left the room. I resealed the file and left a warning inside. Then she locked the door and walked down the corridor toward the security desk, where Milo was logging the incident. Her steps echoed on the tile. The file was sealed, the night report filed, and the future date on the envelope sat in her pocket like a demand. The decision to watch rather than destroy completed the chapter's immediate conflict, and set the office on a new procedural danger that would not close with a stamp. The page slid free and struck the lamp's metal base. Milo swore under his breath. "This is dated after closure," he said, and the words landed in the room like a command. Alina reached for the sheet with her gloved fingers and felt suspicion tighten along the backs of her knuckles. She did not look at Milo for a full beat. Her hands moved to steady the lamp instead, as if procedure could steady thought. Alina had not expected to be arguing at 2 in the morning about a finished file. The room smelled of toner and cold brass. The closure stamp on the outer folder matched the ledger entry, signed final, archived. Yet the top sheet was warm as if it had been run through a typewriter moments earlier. Alina's suspicion pushed her forward. Follow the chain, log the anomaly, do not alter evidence, and she did what she always did. She followed the rules. "Show me," Rowan from the doorway. His voice was flat and small in the big room. Milo handed the page to Alina. Milo's fingers trembled when he passed it. He had never handled a file with a post-closure entry before. Alina did not read the whole page at once. She checked the header, checked the footer, scanned the typed lines with a practiced eye. A directive had been appended, then redactions, then a new line with a single name partially visible. The redaction resolved into a form that referenced internal memos. Her throat closed. She felt doubt shift into a tight, mechanical focus. Log it, tag it, protect the chain of custody. We log it and seal it, Alina. Her voice was the steady, low register she used during audits. We follow protocol. She tapped her index finger once on the file as she spoke. The tap was a small ritual punctuation. Milo looked at her. "Alina, there's no time stamp in the ledger," he swallowed. "If we reseal it, there's no evidence somebody kept writing after closure. If they intended it to be destroyed, we're erasing the proof." He Rowan's name as if invoking him might change the room's atmosphere. Rowan crossed the threshold and set his palm on the metal edge of the review desk. He read the page without taking it. "Security was notified by alert," he said. "This should go to Hayes. We have to follow procedure." His jaw tightened. Authority and habit lined his speech. Before Alina could answer, the overhead console chimed once, the facility's alert tone, a single, thin arpeggio. Security Officer Hayes arrived in under 2 minutes, keys jingling against his belt. He did not look at Milo. He did not look at Rowan. He looked at the folder as if it might be dangerous to the touch. The presence of Hayes transformed the disagreement into a custody question. Milo leaned closer to Alina. "Don't let them shred it," he said, voice low. "If they destroy this, no outside review will ever look at it." His fingers clenched around the rim of the desk. His worry moved like a physical thing across his face. Milo stepped back. Rowan ordered, "Alina, hand it to security." The room contracted to the file and the hands around it. Alina felt the second shift in feeling. Doubt became defiance. She looked at the typed directive again and read the line that mentioned her by name, a line that referenced an internal memo she had signed 3 months prior. The redaction had been lifted enough to show initials. Rowan inhaled once, and the color left his face. "Rowan Elena, I will not let you destroy evidence. We document and escalate. That is procedure." She the words with the cadence of someone quoting policy, yet each syllable carried a tremor. She set the page on the scanner instead of handing it over. "You will not make a decision alone," Rowan replied. "This is containment." His hand moved to the intercom. He was already reaching for institutional levers. He had always been good at them. Hayes stepped around the desk and reached for the file. His fingers closed over the folder. Milo grabbed the outer edge. The contact made a dry noise. The folder resisted at first, then the pages slipped between 2 sets of gloves. Elbow to elbow, they became a physical wedge. "Let go, Hayes." Milo did not comply. "Elena, scan it, please." "Let me be the record." It Elena's eyes directly in a way he rarely did. The look was not panic. It was a request that asked Alina to choose who they would be that night. Elena slid the file under the scanner's lid and hit the start key with a deliberate finger. The scanner hummed and the glass lit. The light caught the typed characters. The machine copied the page. While the scan ran, Alina folded her body around the action. She checked the timestamp on the scan. She confirmed the checksum code. She started a digital chain of custody note on the terminal. Her fingers moved faster than her thoughts. Hayes tugged the folder. "Stop that," he said. "You re-compromising containment." The scanner pinged and the first copy completed. Milo shoved a small, thin envelope toward Alina. He pressed it into her palm with a clumsy motion. "If they take it," he said, "this goes outside." Now, his jaw set. The palpability of his fear made Alina's hands colder. "Milo," Rowan's voice cut across the room with administrative pragmatism. "Stop. The alert calls for discontinuation. No external dissemination." He turned to Hayes. "Secure it." "Discontinue." Rowan's orders fell like planks over the group. He named the policy number aloud as if that alone could close the gap. Elena's mouth opened and closed. Procedure met a new variable. The file had written itself after closure, and that single fact contradicted containment's assumption of closure as final. Procedure offered 2 paths: immediate destruction or immediate custody change. Both felt like consent or erasure. Rowan, this file is still generating entries. Elena, there is evidence on this page that pertains to active procedure breaches. Destroying it closes the loop. We must preserve the record and request protocol review. Her words were short. They carried the authority of someone who had spent decades cataloging paperwork that protected people, and sometimes kept them out of sight. "You heard the directive." Rowan snapped. "Discontinue." He stepped in front of the shredder alcove. "You will not be the one to cause an incident by keeping this." He used the word incident like a legal instrument. Hayes reached for the shredder activation lever. He was methodical. He had done this before, shredding materials marked for termination, but never in this combination of hands and pleas. Milo lunged then, an impulsive move that caught Hayden's wrist. The lever clicked free. Fingers scraped. The folder snapped from Hayes's grip and fluttered across the desk as if a draft had taken it. Alina grabbed the folder. The pages peeled outward and made a faint rasping noise. The newly typed sheet quivered, but it did not tear. Alina wrapped it in a plastic sleeve with a practiced motion. She felt resistance, paper that seemed to bend away when pressure came from certain angles. Her palm warmed against the sleeve's surface. Hayes moved first. "At my signal, secure the room." He barked one order, then another. Security radio squawked outside the door. Men moved down the hall. Rowan's composure finally gave. He pinched the bridge of his nose and said, "Quiet. Elena, do it my way. Hand it over. We'll process this in containment under lock." He used the familiar language of containment to close off conversation. Elena hesitated. Her hands trembled in the sleeve's plastic. Miller watched her with raw, almost boyish urgency. "Elena," he said, Please, the second emotion shift, defiance into fear, arrived as a physical jolt. Elena's throat tightened. She chose. She folded the file closed, tucked the typed sheet into her satchel's inner pocket, and set the sealed packet on the scanner bed. I will scan and log. Then I will seal the original into secure evidence storage with a witness signature. She looked at Rowan. Then we document discontinuation. Not destruction without record. That's not procedure. Her voice thinned but held. Rowan's face went white. You will not make unilateral decisions, he said. You are not authorized to change containment orders. This is above you. He stalked forward and grabbed for the satchel strap. Elena did not pull away. Her hands were steady as she unhooked the archival stamp on its chain and set it on the desk. Miller reached for the scanner's control pad. Do it now, he said. Seal the packet with a witness. He Rowan's name sharply. Rowan, sign it. Put your stamp on it. You will be recorded as the witness. The demand was a pin in Rowan's professional skin. Rowan blinked. Rowan's jaw worked. He argued back in clipped sentences. We do not allow external record transfer on site. You are endangering security. The argument's tempo stepped into sharp back and forth. Milo answered, Rowan answered, Elena answered. The room's air felt like a ledger being balanced. Entries added, subtracted, disputed. Hayes turned the file over and peered at the typed sheet. The paper is warm. His voice was smaller. He reached toward the sleeve. Elena put the satchel between them with a motion that was not a retreat and not a challenge. Rowan, she said, stamp the evidence with me. Sign the custody note. We'll scan, then lock the original under seal. You will record the discontinuation. We'll follow the chain. That keeps the record intact and constrains the breach. Her words were exact, and they read like an offer to share culpability rather than shirk it. Rowan stared at the satchel and then at the scanner. The institutional gears turned. He straightened his shoulders and nodded once. Fine. We document together. He took the stamp and the custody log and moved to sign. Reluctant compliance changed the shape of the disagreement into temporary truce. Milo breathed out like someone who had let air back into his lungs. Elena placed the satchel on the desk and slid the typed sheet out, just enough for the camera to record the visible lines. She made notes on the chain of custody form. She pressed the archival stamp into the log. Her hands were precise. The scanner finished its second pass and produced a verification code. Miller recorded the code into his tablet. The room's tension shifted toward constrained procedure. Then the pages reacted. The typed sheet darkened along its margin as if ink were bleeding from an unseen ribbon. The black letters pooled deeper, and an additional line resolved across the bottom, a date that read 3 days from now. Elena felt her stomach drop. She set the paper down. The new line was not present when she first slid the sheet under glass. The scanner's light had illuminated something and prompted an addition. It wrote again, Milo, voice small. It wrote while we watched. The air in the room tightened without theatrics. The men moved like people who had forgotten an essential step in habit. Hayes swore. Rowan's face crumpled as if someone had struck him. Hayes reached for the folder and then froze. Elena saw the arrested motion. She watched Hayes's arm and then watched his face change. His composure slid into an almost mechanical obedience. He set the folder down. He glanced at Rowan. Rowan's hand shook around the pen. Secure it now, Rowan ordered, abrupt and brittle. Lockdown Protocol 8-4. Security log everything. Milo, you restricted. Elena, you escort the file to temporary vault with me as witness. He tried to re-establish a clear chain of responsibility. Security entered and moved in practiced formations. Milo was gently restrained by a gloved pair behind him. He did not struggle. Elena watched them take him to a holding room and felt an ache that was neither guilt nor relief, but something in between. She had begun the night with suspicion and the mechanical response to it. Now she carried responsibility. In the containment corridor, Elena sealed the packet in a clear evidence pouch. She slid the pouch into a heavy envelope and affixed Rowan's signed custody slip. Rowan signed with a pen that trembled slightly. Hayes recorded the serial number into the security ledger. Elena's hands were steady, but her breathing came in small, counted pulls. She felt the third emotional shift. Defiance had become fear. Her jaw clenched. She tasted metal. She kept performing required motions. Stamp, sign, log. Each action anchored her. Each action kept the file from being destroyed without record. When they returned to the review chamber, the office moved into a brief, tense reconfiguration. Men locked cabinets, traced cameras' logs, and called down to other departments. Conversations happened in clipped lines across radios. Elena sat at her desk and unfolded the small sheet she had been unable to relinquish. She had kept a single copy tucked into her satchel's inner pocket, an instinct she could not explain, but that had the weight of training behind it. She read the added line again. It included a name and a date and a short instruction that was partially redacted. The instruction was addressed to an internal address that had been deactivated months prior. Elena's mouth went dry. She turned the page and saw a new line appear in the bottom margin while she stared at it. A line with the word "stop" crossed out and replaced with a single, blacked-out square. Her fingers trembled and she made a practical choice. Elena set the sheet on the scanner and initiated a secure, offline transfer to the external oversight archives address that ran through a second-level encrypted channel she had used only twice before in emergency protocols. She typed the routing manually and watched the progress bar crawl forward. Milo watched from the holding room through thick, wired glass. He mouthed something indistinct. Elena could not read his lips. The transfer completed. The terminal printed a confirmation slip with a routing hash. Elena kept one physical copy in the satchel and slipped the rest into an evidence locker. She signed the external transfer request and initialed it with her archival stamp. She then drafted a memorandum to the oversight office, describing the sequence of events attaching the digital checksum and the chain of custody log. Her sentences were short and precise. She did not editorialize. Rowan read the memorandum and then closed his eyes. "You resending it out," he said. "You realize the consequences." His expression was exhausted. He had constructed the office to be a buffer between hazards and the public. Elena understood that his fear was not for himself only but for the institution's stability. "Yes, Elena, I am sending it." Her reply had no flourish. She added a stamped annotation that indicated temporary discontinuation pending oversight review. The annotation left open the possibility that the file would be recalled to institutional custody. It also ensured preservation. Hayes returned from his rounds and reported that other logs showed anomalous edits in dispersed folders, minor and isolated at first. He read the audit trail aloud. Each new line in the log was a factual beating of a drum. The pattern suggested the anomaly was not confined to one folder. Rowan's face turned a color Elena had seen in reports about forced compliance, a mix of calculation and grief. In the holding room, Milo was released with a formal admonition. He walked back into the review chamber with his hands unclipped and his head lowered. "I'm sorry," he said to Elena. The apology was concise and immediate. He touched the side of her hand briefly and left a residue of warmth. Elena nodded once. The contact meant more than the politics of the moment. Rowan called a short, closed meeting with immediate supervisors and instituted temporary restrictions. No destruction without 2 external witnesses, immediate logging of any post, closure entry, temporary suspension of automated discontinuation routines. The office moved into a contained repair mode. Security doubled patrols. Each administrative choice was an attempt to make the unknown legible. The group thought containment was now procedural again. Elena thought in a narrower, more personal register. She had seen a sheet continue to write itself while they watched, and she had acted to preserve a record. That choice had consequences. She sent the file out. She risked institutional reprisal. She altered the ledger of who would bear witness. Her action resolved something she had not named until then: complicity. At dawn, when the fluorescent hum in the archive diluted into a pale blue, Elena stood alone at her desk. Milo had left early, his face pale but steady. Rowan had been called into a separate hearing. Hayes had gone to patrol. Elena unbuttoned her cardigan and took out the single paper she had kept. The page had one new line typed across the corner in letters that were cramped but clear. The date read 7 days hence. Below it, a faint instruction: observe. Elena folded the sheet carefully and placed it into the worn leather satchel that had labels on its flap. She found the keyring made from a pocket watch and turned it. The small metal tick made a sound she always associated with duty. She put on her rimless glasses, stamped the custody form once more, and closed the ledger. The office felt small in a way that matched the end of a formal shift. She walked to the outer door of the archival wing. The morning corridor smelled of coffee and ozone. The security keypad blinked green for authorized exit. Elena set the satchel on her shoulder and hesitated with her hand on the handle of the outer door. She had choices. Stay and continue to fight inside the system, or step out and carry proof to people who were supposed to overarch the office. She placed the satchel under her arm and stepped into the corridor. She locked the archive's outer door behind her with the official key Rowan had once given her during promotion. The lock clicked and bolted. She did not look back toward the lamped hallway. Her action was a full decision. The office would keep operating, but she would no longer be the person who sealed questionable endings alone. As she left, a junior tech called her name Elena. He handed her a small printed slip. They received your transfer. Oversight logged a receipt. They say they'll review immediately. The slip smelled faintly of toner. Elena folded the paper into her palm like a talisman and felt the texture anchor her. Milo emerged at the outer edge of the compound and caught up to her. He waited until she slowed. They released me, he said. He touched the satchel's strap in a wordless show of solidarity. Thank you. His breath fogged in the morning. He spoke without flourish. Elena nodded. She did not promise anything that could count as a vow. She did one practical thing. She wrote a short note, folded it, and dropped it into Milo's palm. It read, "Keep copies." He looked at the paper and then at her, understanding both the instruction and the warning held inside it. At the gate, she toggled the watch key that she kept as a ring on her bag. It made its small mechanical clack. The guard scanned her badge and lifted the barrier. She walked through and felt the sun's weak edge on her face, a detail she never noticed on a night shift. She did not return to her desk that afternoon. She sat in her small apartment instead and opened the satchel. The single sheet lay where she had kept it. The typed margin bore another line she had not seen when she left. Today, the line read, "Receipt confirmed." Elena breathed and let herself register a single concrete physical reaction. She rubbed her thumb across the corner of the page until the paper warmed beneath her skin. She wrote a final archive note, addressed to herself in a dry, factual tone used in internal memos. Document retention. Preserved. External transfer initiated. Institutional discontinuation pending oversight. She initialed it and put it into the satchel. Then she slid the single sheet back into the inner pocket and closed the satchel's flap. On the walk to the oversight office, Elena set the satchel tight against her side. She did not hurry. She had done what she could with the tools at hand. She had scanned, stamped, documented, and transmitted. The larger question of why the file had continued to write remained outside of her authority and, for now, outside of her proof. But she had made a record that someone above the institution could not simply erase without showing a signature. At the oversight office, a clerk accepted the envelope and scanned the evidence hash. She signed the receipt with a legible hand and handed Elena a printed acknowledgement. Elena read the line and let the letters settle into facts rather than theories. Her actions had created a small, replicable trace. When she left, Milo was waiting on the sidewalk. He one question, "Are you leaving?" His tone held hope and a wary accountability. Elena considered the satchel, the seal, the ledger of stamps and signatures she had accumulated this night. She felt an ending arrive through a sequence of actions rather than through epiphany. She had chosen record over inertia. She had chosen procedure's skeleton rather than empty obedience. That choice had cost her the comfortable illusion of institutional insulation. It had freed her from a different kind of compliance. "I'm leaving the office for a while," she said. Her voice was low and precise. "I will monitor the oversight response. I will not be complicit in unrecorded destruction." Her words were direct and left little room for rhetorical flourish. Milo's eyes registered the decision. He nodded. "Good," he said. Elena folded the printed acknowledgement and slid it into the satchel. She closed the flap, felt the leather's familiar give, and walked away with Milo at her side. The city moved in the usual ways around them. Buses hissed, a mail carrier shouted down a block, someone dropped a cup on the pavement and cursed. Those ordinary noises anchored the morning in concrete fact. At the crosswalk, Elena stopped and took the satchel off her shoulder. She opened the inner pocket and held the typed sheet out to the light. The ink along the margin had settled. No new lines had appeared in public view. She felt a small human relief. Her suspicion had driven her to preserve a record. Her defiance had pushed procedure to adapt. Her fear had taught her to act with care. Those emotional shifts had moved her through the night's choices. She folded the sheet and tucked it back into the satchel. Milo watched her do this with a guarded expression. He one more question, quietly. "You think they'll act?" Elena closed the satchel and looked at him. They have the record now. That was the truth she could stake. It was not guarantee. It was documentation. It was the most concrete thing she could make. They walked toward the tram stop together. Elena kept her steps measured. She had completed the chain of custody by action, scanning, stamping, transmitting, and placing a witness on record. The institutional fight would continue elsewhere, but within the archive she had stopped one immediate erasure. Before the tram arrived, she paused and checked the inner pocket one last time. The sheet had a new line in tiny letters at its very bottom, a notation she had not seen earlier. Observe. It was not a command she could disobey by paperwork. It was a fact on paper. Elena folded the page and placed it against her chest inside the satchel. She felt the paper's thin edge through the leather. Her final act in the office that night had been to convert suspicion into an action that could be audited. Her choice to preserve the sheet and invoke external oversight concluded her immediate conflict with Rowan and Hayes. She had not proven the cause of the anomaly. She had instead created a path that made erasure expensive. Milo stepped onto the tram and offered her a quiet, practical smile. "Keep copies," he repeated. Elena nodded. She did not promise more than she could deliver. She felt a solidness that arose from concrete acts, rather than from hope. When she reached the small apartment that had always smelled of dry paper and cold metal, she set the satchel on the table and opened it. The typed sheet lay folded in the inner pocket. She smoothed it once with a practiced thumb and placed it into an evidence sleeve labeled with the scan's checksum. She locked the sleeve inside a small portable deposit box she owned for personal backups. She took one final physical action. She removed her archival stamp from its chain and placed it on the shelf with the watch, key, and the ledger of signatures. She left the lamp on dim and sat at the desk outside the city moved. Inside, the room held the ordered objects of someone who had made choices that night and was willing to take their consequences. Elena closed the deposit box and slid the key into her palm. She felt a small, precise resolve. Document, preserve, refuse erasure. The paper in the satchel would be evidence, not silence. She turned off the lamp and went to the window. The sky had paled to a clear, thin blue. She locked the apartment door behind her once, then twice, checking the bolt. Her last concrete action of the chapter was to place the deposit box key into an envelope and hand it, the next morning, to the oversight clerk who had acknowledged the receipt. Elena gave the clerk her name and the log numbers. She stepped back and let the institutional chain take the paper from her hands. The final movement was administrative and therefore decisive. Later that week, the Oversight Office issued an instruction: immediate external review. Temporary suspension of unilateral destruction orders. Rowan's unit was called to testify. Milo returned to a desk with new responsibilities. Hayes was reassigned pending investigation. The office had changed because the chain Elena set in motion required formal accounting. Elena sat in a sunlighted room outside the archive and read the Oversight's initial notice. Confirmation that the file was received, preservation ordered, review initiated. She felt a hollow in her chest where fear had lived, and a quiet closure that arrived from facts on record. The case remained open, but the immediate conflict, destroy or preserve, had been resolved in a way that carried consequences and transparency. She folded the printed notice into the satchel and snapped the leather closed. She had not solved why the page continued to add lines. The anomaly existed. But she had turned one unknown into a documented sequence. She had chosen to record rather than erase. That choice shifted who would bear witness and who would be accountable. Elena left the satchel with Oversight for safekeeping under their custody number and signed the required transfer forms again. She walked out of the building and breathed the air of the city. She had acted. She had followed procedure, then bent it to force a record. Her actions closed the immediate dispute and opened a path for external review. She walked away from the Oversight Office without a promise that the anomaly would stop. She walked with a set of exact, stamped traces that other people could trace back. The files would continue to be watched, the archival wing would be audited, and her name would be on the chain, of custody that could not be wiped without documentation. At the edge of the afternoon, Milo found her sitting on a bench. He handed her a plain sheet of paper folded into quarters. On it he had written, in careful letters, "Keep copies." She smiled once and folded it into her wallet. They did not speak at length. Their choices had been made through the night's actions. Elena slid the satchel into a secure locker at oversight and walked away with a clear, recorded trail. The file continued to exist. The institution could not claim ignorance. For Elena, the chapter concluded with a series of precise acts. Preserve, transmit, witness, and hand over to a higher registry. Those acts were concrete and auditable, and they resolved the immediate conflict. Her final, concrete moment in the chapter came when she turned her badge in at the archive's administrative desk on her way out of the building for the week. She did not dramatize the handover. She slid the badge across the counter and watched it rest on the ledger. The clerk initialed the receipt. Elena left the wing and felt the cool air on her face. She had followed suspicion to an action that would be visible to others. That visibility was the closest she could come to closing the loop. She walked into the city with the knowledge that the file's writing might continue, but now it would be recorded in places the archive could not erase. She kept one habit. Every morning after that week, she checked the oversight's public logs for entries bearing the custody number. Each new line of confirmation was a small factual reassurance. The emotional shifts of the night, suspicion to defiance, defiance to fear, fear to procedural resolve, had guided her choices and concluded her role in this particular incident. The rest would be left to formal review and to the record she had created. The final page of the folder remained under official seal at oversight. Elena had done what she could. She had documented, preserved, and initiated accountability. She had not cured the anomaly. She had, however, prevented immediate erasure. The archive door was locked behind her, but a chain of stamped, signed records now existed in 3 locations. That chain was concrete, auditable, and capable of forcing questions into light. She walked away with a satchel lighter in hairline thickness, but heavier in consequence. The last concrete sound she heard in the building was the stamp hitting paper. She could still feel the vibration in her fingertips. She kept that sense as a small, precise reminder of what she had done and why she had done it.